Our guest today is the CEO of 1871. She is the first woman CEO of 1871, now the #1 ranked tech incubator in the world. Prior to 1871, our guest today served as the Chief Innovation Officer at the Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern. She earned her bachelor's degree in economics at Ohio State University, and she earned her MBA from Harvard Business School. Ladies and gentlemen, Betsy Ziegler. Betsy?
Thank you. Hi, everybody. It's great to be here. This is my first time at the City Club, although I've been convinced to come more frequently. It's great to see everybody out. I've run into lots of old friends, met some new ones already, so thank you very much. There are three things that I want to talk about today. The first is to give you guys all a sense of where Chicago is with respect to tech. Like, where is the momentum, what's actually happening. Second, talk about 1871, what's happening there, what are we doing, what are we focused on. And third, do a really quick flyby on my three favorite trends, or what I like to think of as gravitational shifts right now. We'll go fast through them, and it was hard for me to pick only three because there's so many interesting things happening right now in the world. So let's first of all talk about Chicago. Here's our city. So tech makes up about 13% of the Chicago economy, up from 2% just 6 years ago. So that's a massive growth rate. We are ranked as the 6th startup ecosystem in the entire world. And if you look at the top 20 startup ecosystems and you look at the percentage of female founders across those top 20, which is a global number, the average percentage of female founders is 18%. In Chicago, it's 30%. Which I think that's important. The other honor Chicago has is that we have the highest investor returns of any city in the country for the last 3, possibly 4 years, as ranked by PitchBook. And what that means is that 45% of the investments made, at least in the last year, returned more than a 10x or more return. So any investors in the room, that's a pretty good bet. Part of that is due to the density of the Fortune 500 companies that are in our backyard. So we have about 36 Fortune 500 in Chicago and 150 in the Midwest. And we have a lot of B2B and B2B2C entrepreneurial activity here, and so that's a really good match. Outside of Silicon Valley, we are ranked second in exit value. So what I mean by that is if you look at the 5 years, 2012 through 2017, you take Silicon Valley out, and you look at all the major exits. It goes LA, Chicago, New York, Boston. And when you look, and Chicago's about 15 billion, and you look at companies like Grubhub, which just passed the $10 billion mark this week. You look at Clever Safe, Fieldglass, those kinds of companies, that makes up that list. And if you look at LA, they're at 30 billion, and 20 billion of the 30 billion all came from Snap. So if you happen to take Snap out, then we become #1. So hard to do. But so what I'd like to tell groups is that something special is really happening in Chicago, and I think we're at the front end of this journey. We're only 10, 20 years into this experience, and we have a lot more to do and a lot more opportunity going forward. If you look at 1871, who's been there? All right, lots of you, fantastic. Howard, this is your doing, right, getting this crowd there, that's great. So 1871 is Chicago's central tech address. I think, though, that the opportunity has really never been higher to partner across the city. And when I say partner, I mean with the universities, with the corporates, with folks like you, with the other incubators in the space. So who knows why we're called 1871? All right. So this is the city in 1871. And then the city met up with this guy and this guy. And what happened, right, is what happened after the fire was more important, how the entire, from every walk of life, every background came together to rebuild Chicago. And we think of 1871 as this place where that's fully inclusive of anyone that's in and around the ecosystem should come and help our entrepreneurs be successful. So this is the inside of 1871 for those that haven't been there, and we like to say that 1871 exists to inspire, equip, and support founders to build great businesses. So what that really means is that myself and my team wake up every day trying to increase the probability of success for all of those founding companies in our space. And I just want to spend 1 second and point out my team. So I've got a table here, wave. And I've got Jahan here joining me at the head table. And so this group plus some more people that are back at the office are the ones that really make this happen. All right, so let's talk about the 5 most important things to know about 1871. The first is that 1871 was born out of the Chicagoland Entrepreneurial Center, the CEC, in 2012, and the CEC was born out of the Commercial Club. So it has some lineage that I think is important to keep in mind when we talk about the history of tech in Chicago. The second was already been shared. We're ranked in February the #1 university-affiliated business incubator in the world, and that was out of a list of 1,370 options. So, I'm used to dealing with rankings at Kellogg, and we didn't have to think about 1,370 other locations. There are about 460 companies operating out of 1871 right now, and roughly 400 or so alumni out in the world continue to grow and operate their businesses. And at the last count, 21 of our companies had been acquired over the last 6 years. Our how is really where our special sauce is, and that is the connectivity that happens underneath our roof, where all these people have the opportunity to kind of bounce into each other, these productive collisions we like to talk about. So entrepreneur to entrepreneur, to a mentor, to a venture capitalist, to an angel investor, to a university leader, through workshops, events, et cetera. We do 1,000 events a year. We put on roughly 400 workshops a year. We've got 500 mentors and workshop leaders that do 10,000 hours of coaching a year, right? These numbers are like sort of crazy, massive, and we have certainly Howard and the team during his tenure to thank for all of that. And then you say, well, that's great, all that activity is great, but does it matter? Where does it matter? And how do you think about the impact? And we as of last count, we have about 8,000 jobs have been created by 1871 companies in Chicago over the last 6 years, and about $250 million of follow-on capital. Right? So I think that's a pretty good track record for 6 years. Yeah. Now I want to change gears a little bit and talk about how I see the world shifting and what that means for all of us and how we can think about it. So I like this quote from Larry Page that lots of companies don't succeed over time, and it's because they miss the future. And when you talk about missing the future, it's easy in a lot of ways to predict what might happen in the future. It's really hard to predict when it will happen. And the reason for that is because we are now living in exponential times. We used to live in linear times, and in linear times, you basically just look at the past and you extrapolate forward to figure out what might happen in the future. But that doesn't work anymore. The pace of change is never as slow as it is today. And I normally bring my iPhone X up here to show, but I have a young son, and that is the worst technology he's ever going to experience is my iPhone X. Right? I mean, he does not have an appreciation for how I grew up, right? You got this guy in Kenya who has more technology at his fingertips right now than the President of the United States did 15 years ago. You've got this guy in 1962, that my iPhone X is 1,000 times more powerful than the computer that put him on the moon. That's an extraordinary amount of change in a relatively short period of time. If you look at the biggest market caps 50 years ago, 3 of these companies still exist, 2 of them don't. Kodak had a brief moment in January or February of this year. They launched an ICO, initial coin offering for those that are not crypto aware. So they had a sort of a quick, short-lived comeback. If you look at the biggest market caps today, Apple, Alphabet, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, and Tencent, and then you look at numbers 6, 7, and 8, Berkshire Hathaway is number 6, Alibaba and Facebook, and Alibaba and Facebook didn't exist 20 years ago. Did not exist. And Facebook, at 2 billion or so members, is bigger than any country on the planet. Right? China and India are both at about 1.4 billion. Facebook is the largest country in the world, if you want to think about it that way. The winning business models look really nothing like they did in the past. So the biggest media company in the world doesn't own any of its content. Who's that? Any guesses? Facebook. The biggest storage company doesn't have any warehouses. Dropbox. Yeah. This isn't meant to be a trick, I promise. The biggest transportation company in the world doesn't own any cars. Or Uber's friend in China, Didi Chuxing. Largest music company doesn't produce any of its own music. Spotify, yep. And finally, the largest hospitality company in the world doesn't own any of its own rooms. Airbnb, right. So when you think of that, right, the 5 largest companies in the world across the whole globe that didn't exist, most of them didn't exist more than 10 years ago, don't own any of their assets, don't do any things that the previous competitors did. They've completely reimagined how to deliver to customers and have completely taken over. And in case you just need more proof, 52% of the Fortune 500 companies have disappeared in the last 18 years. The average lifespan of a Fortune 500 company has shrunk from around 60 years to 20. And as you think about, a lot of people like to think that we're in the 4th industrial revolution at this stage, and if you think about that, every company is a technology company, every company is a data company, and therefore every company must start to think about how to operate like a software company. So I'm going to talk through some trends, and I'm going to go pretty quickly. These are the 5 questions when I work with corporations and others that come in the 1871 space. These are the questions I like to have them think about as I go through here. Now, I'm not going to walk through all of them, but you're welcome to take a photo if it's helpful and go through. So my 3 favorite gravitational shifts happening now, and it was really hard to pick the 3 because there's so much that we could talk about. So we could talk about artificial intelligence and machine learning. We could talk about energy. We could talk about medicine. We could talk about space. We could talk about robots. We could talk about drones. Right? I didn't pick any of those. So if those are your favorite topics, you'll have to have a second conversation. The first one I want to talk about is the Internet of Everything. So earlier this year, basically a 4,000-mile cable got completed under the Atlantic Ocean, 17,000 feet, underneath the Atlantic Ocean, called Marea, which is the Spanish word for tide. And now that cable has been created, in terms of capacity, you can do 71 million. You can simultaneously be watching 71 million HD videos at the same time with no interruption in service. And this cable allows 16 million times faster than your home internet. So I don't know if any of you are frustrated with your home internet, but this is a good thing, right? 5G wireless is coming, and some of you might be experts about 5G, and other of you might have no idea what it is. And basically, it's sort of the next level of wireless connection, and why we need it is because of this massive explosion in everything being connected to the internet. Before we just had our cell phone, now we've got our watch and our cell phone, and some of us have all of our equipment at home talking to the internet, and we need more capacity. And so it's going to take a while for this to fully roll out, and depending on where you live, you're going to get it faster than other folks. Project Loon, I don't know if you're familiar with Project Loon, came out of Google. It's a company out of Google. It's a network of balloons that are bringing internet connectivity, and it is working right now. It's delivering internet access to about 100,000 people in Puerto Rico. And they figured out the technology such that no matter how the wind blows, it stays stable. The balloon part can move like a balloon does, but the mechanism inside stays stable so it doesn't impact the delivery of access. OneWeb is a group of companies that have come together that launched with about a $1.2 billion investment from SoftBank, because SoftBank has been on an investing tear lately, for those of you following. About almost 890 satellites to give global broadband access, and that's launching in 2019. So you might say, sort of, why does any of this matter? And it matters because if you look at the purple bar is the people that are online, and the blue bar is the population of the globe. And what we're saying is, as all these Project Loon and the satellites and the Maria underneath the water, all these come to life, what it means is that pretty soon, a couple years, every single person on the globe will have access to the internet. And what that really means is there's 4 billion more customers coming into our world. And 4 billion more people that will have the opportunity for a different level of prosperity, that will need education, that will move into the middle class, right? The world is going to shift a lot over the next 7 or 8 years. So I like to think about how long, before, not that long ago, having 1 billion users or 1 billion customers was a really big deal. Like, it was like, wow, I heard 1 billion. Pretty soon that's not going to be such a big deal. So McDonald's, it took 23 years. You can read these. Gangnam Style, we're familiar with Gangnam Style? No? I'm not going to perform it, but it's Psy, South Korean musician, performer. And then, I think Pokemon Go would be the next one that you say, oh, Pokemon Go, where's Pokemon Go? Pokemon Go was the fastest to 50 million in, I think, 50 days. But then they capped out, so they're at about 600 million. So it's not clear they're going to ever get to the billion. 5 billion people have a mobile phone. About half of those are smartphones. But only 4 billion people have a toothbrush. That's real. That's real data. So, and we're just at the start of the sensor revolution, right? The Internet of Things revolution, and by 2022, so that's 3.5 years away, it's expected that 1 trillion connected sensors will populate our world and basically be embedded into anything that we make. 200 billion apps were downloaded last year. Time spent on mobile devices has shifted from 20 minutes 10 years ago to more than 3 hours. Now, I want to know by raise of hands who this is in the audience, right? How many of you touch your phone more than 2,500 times a day? And touch does not mean like caress, right? It means like touch, like do something with, right? We now have a shorter attention span than a goldfish. This was a real study that Microsoft did. I mean, this is like research. Like, I don't know how they did it. I don't know how they sort of identified the goldfish to be in the study, but it's real. I like this. I saw this the other day at the. I didn't see it at the zoo. I saw it online, but I mean, this is real. I mean, people are literally going into caged animal things at the zoo because they see a Pokemon something, right? And they're dying because of it. The number one, I don't know if you saw this the other day, a lot of people have died recently taking selfies, which is, of course, not something to laugh at. And you think, well, what is the number one reason to die taking a selfie? And apparently, I would have thought it would be falling, but apparently it's drowning. So, I mean, I don't know, I don't swim with my iPhone, but if you do, be careful. Okay. Where everything is on demand, like everything you can possibly imagine is on demand. Amazon is now delivering to our cars. It's live in 37 cities. They say they'll only unlock it if it's the right person, the right time, and the right car. That's sort of a good mantra to have, I suppose. Proximity-driven contextual commerce. So now you're at a game or you're walking through the mall and there's something that is in your history that says that you might want this certain thing and kind of floats in front of you that allows you to get it. Live streaming your shopping experience has become this massive deal in China with about almost 500 million viewers. So these are individuals who are selling things out of their own home, and they're sort of trying to best themselves on how crazy they can be to sell something. They've got about $4.5 billion in value so far, and it's basically this idea that e-commerce and entertainment have come together. So if you think about the US context with the Home Shopping Network and QVC, things like that, they have it's as close to that as possible, but in China, there's this interactivity that's happening. So you see something that is being advertised, and you can actually interact and chat with, and then everybody else can learn from that or build on that conversation. In-store mobile tracking and heat mapping. So if you ever get the sense that you're being watched in a store, you are. And they're, depending on what the colors mean, they will send people to you to help, right? Augmented reality has come to instruction manuals, and so this is IKEA example. IKEA also, so this is how you like actually put the IKEA furniture together. You can also use it to see how the IKEA furniture actually works in your, looks in your home. These AR tools are helping us be better performers. To understand our health, this is a pocket EKG that costs about $100, and it sends data back, and you can send it to your doctor if you want it to. Haptic forks that help you track what you're eating. This is my favorite. This is a wallet that as you spend during the month, it knows your budget, and as you spend, it gets harder to open. This is a young man who's developed this thing called alter ego. Did any of you see this on 60 Minutes? Yeah, it's quite remarkable, right? So basically, he's being interviewed. He's not communicating out loud, but silently he's translating through this machine into the computer the question that he's been asked, and he's getting the answer back in vibrations. These are a bunch of young guys that have developed electronic gloves that translate sign language into speech. This is for people that suffer from Parkinson's or other diseases that allow them to go out for meals with their family and have a stabilizing utensil so that they can feel like they can enjoy with everybody else. It looks like I have a random purple spot here. I apologize for that. Changing the way, so this is these big bellies. You've seen the big bellies out in Chicago, and basically the importance of those big bellies is that because they're connected to the internet, they know when they're full or when they're not, and they send a sensor, so they only get collected when they're full. And it saves a ton of money because it reduces the amount of collections that aren't necessary. All right, so that's sort of the internet of everything. Now I want to talk about the future of mobility. So Uber is now putting self-driving cars back on the road. They launched, I think, last week again in Pittsburgh. They were in Phoenix in partnership with Volvo. You might have heard that a woman died because it got hit by a self-driving car in March in Phoenix, so they put it on hold for a while. It turns out the reason that happened was because while Volvo, which is obviously very safety-conscious brand, very clear about like anti-lock brakes and things like that, the Uber app that sat on top of it disabled the Volvo anti-lock system, right? So they're fixing that, hopefully. Uber's ordered a whole bunch of cars from Volvo, and Apple has signed a deal with Volkswagen for a bunch of transporter vans that will be autonomous. Waymo, which is a company, part of the Alphabet group, the Google group, is the first autonomous car on the road without a safety driver in 5 cities. They are live in Phoenix right now. And they've driven 8 million miles, which translates to about 25,000 miles per day that they've been in testing mode, which is far more than any other company. And you're automatically insured, you get in it, you're automatically insured at no extra cost. GM's autonomous car, this is the 2019 model. You notice anything missing from it? No steering wheel. And no pedals. It's hard to see that from here, but yeah, it'd be kind of weird, right? Ford is partnered with Lyft for a plan to do self-driving ride-hailing in about 3-ish years, 3.5 years. Beijing has given the green light to self-driving cars all over the city. Tesla's self-driving electronic semi-truck. And this is important for a number of reasons. One is that it can do 500 miles on a single charge, and it can go 0 to 60 in some extraordinary fast way. But if you look at truck drivers as a job category in the United States, first of all, it's got a lot of vacancies right now. There's a lot of demand for truck drivers that don't exist yet. But once these things start rolling out, it's about 3 million truck drivers in the country. And so next to retail cashiers, it's the second most, and teachers, it's the third most dense job. And so that's a really big problem when you start to think about the impact of some of this on the socioeconomic situation in the country. Skytran is these they're called personal rapid transit pods, I guess, which aim to connect the compactness and the privacy of being in your own car with the efficiency of mass transit. And a town in South Carolina has optioned this, and so they're starting to build now. I can't remember the name of the city at the moment, but these are little, you kind of, if you Google it, you can you get into one of these pods up to 4 people, and then you roll on these things above the city. Airbus 4-passenger flying taxi is going live this year, live in testing mode, and for right now it will be with a pilot, but the plan is for it to be without a pilot. So, you know, you've never been in a flying taxi before, and now we'd like to invite you to come into one with no pilot, right? You know, like, sure. I'm not going to be first. All right, the Boring Company. People know why this is important for us here in Chicago? So I have a short video that is about a minute and a half that kind of gives people, have people seen what the Boring Company is all about? Want to see the video? Yeah. Okay, all right. So this is the hope for what's going to be built here in Chicago from the Loop to O'Hare, and I think, which I think is massively exciting, and I think it's a huge signal that Elon and team have chosen Chicago to do this in, and that the mayor and that team have voted in confidence to have this come, and so I think it's just tremendous. Now, it's going to take some time, but I think it's amazing. So Arrivo is a company that competes with the Hyperloop. So there's 3 companies that come out of Elon. The Hyperloop technology is this like super high speed like train, if you guys see, so which goes like 300 miles an hour, so you can get from Columbus to Chicago in like 12 minutes. And you might have picked up on the fact that I'm an Ohio State fan, so this allows me to go to use my season tickets very easily at Ohio State in 12 minutes back and forth. There's a couple of the senior people from Hyperloop originally that have left Hyperloop and have started competing companies. One of those competing companies is called Arrivo. Arrivo has signed a deal in Denver to basically leverage technology that's similar to the Boring Company, where you drive your car on this little sled, and the sled flings you super fast to where you want to go, and they're in progress of building the first leg, which is from downtown Denver to the airport. All right, I only have a few minutes left, so I'm going to speed up a little bit. I'm not going to show this video, although I do want to. Okay, so I'm going to go, it's going to be 90 seconds delayed, all right? Ed? Okay, all right. So this is SpaceX. B is big and R is rocket, and you can figure out what the F is for. Point-to-point travel. This is another of Elon's visions, and so. So you can imagine what the world would be like if you get anywhere on the globe in less than an hour. All right. So we all know about bike sharing. Bike sharing is starting to take over cities, and now we've got the scooters. Here come the scooters. And the bike sharing and the scooters, right, what we really are seeing is the manifestation of a couple of trends coming together. Urbanization, wellness, on-demand, mobile, right? These things, for this last mile transportation, these are coming together. And I get that we don't have Bird or Lime here in Chicago yet, and I get that they are causing like 5 to 10 emergency room visits a week in cities that are there, and they're causing some eyesores in some places, but I have to tell you that they're super fun. The team from Bird was over at 1871 last week, and we, don't tell anybody, but we rode them up and down the 12th floor of the Mart, and it was amazing. It was totally amazing. Okay, I know I got a race, but so the last one, I'm gonna go quick, is blockchain. And I think the question for blockchain, is it this magical invention that'll change life as we know it, or is it the most overhyped technology of the 21st century, or said otherwise, is it this generation's Beanie Baby? I am actually quite bullish on the blockchain. There's not much to say about it yet, but I think the potential is very, very large. Here's the different areas that the blockchain kind of influences: smart contracts, digital currency, record keeping, securities. The only real consumer application right now is in Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. Coinbase, which is the platform that a lot of people use to manage their cryptocurrency, has over 20 million account holders, which far surpasses Schwab's brokerage accounts. Goldman Sachs has a cryptocurrency trading desk. JP Morgan has a group inside the business that is focused on how to think about how to apply the blockchain principles to the bank. And one of the things this idea I'd like to leave you with is this: KYC is know your customer, KYM is know your machine, and the technology exists to do what I'm about to describe. It's not live in any real environment yet, but the technology exists to do it, where your machine basically can be tokenized. It can have a wallet. Your machine can have a wallet, so to speak, that can, based on what rules you say for it, it can make decisions on those rules. So let's say this is before the Boring Company's tunnel is in place from here to O'Hare, and you are on your way to the airport and you're stuck in traffic. You can authorize your car to pay other cars to get out of the way. I mean, the technology is there. I mean, the technology could do that. Now, we're not doing it, but it is technically possible for that to happen. So it's sort of extraordinary. Estonia launched an e-residency program where you can, and has almost 36,000 e-residents who've set up 3,500 companies to make it easier for people to incorporate. So this is the Delaware of this generation, right? Okay, so what does all this mean for you? So I know I've talked fast and I've thrown a lot of stuff out here, and some of this is sort of a sparkly thing, and some of it might be sort of fearful for some of you in the audience. I think that despite the rate of change never being higher and the level of ambiguity never being greater in our world, I don't think there's ever been a more interesting and exciting time to be alive, and I have a very abundant view of the future that no opportunity is beyond our grasp. And so as I think about how you guys could think about this, is think about where your advantages are and how these technologies, how these trends, how can you leverage them in new ways going forward. And remember what Zuck likes to say, that if they don't create the thing that kills Facebook, somebody else will. All right, thank you.
Is it okay if I lower this?
Sure. You could probably take it, yeah.
Thank you, Betsy, for the most interesting and provocative program. And, you know, Howard always used to come and he'd have all these little overheads and jokes, but I think you've given him a good run for his money, right, Howard? So we're going to have a face-off one of these years. Okay. If anyone has any questions, God, how could you not? Blue slips, our staff will come around and collect them. And meanwhile, we'll try to answer as many of these questions as we can. This is from Mona Asra with DePaul University. Are we going to see more diversity and inclusion-focused programming and events at 1871 in the technology space?
So the short answer is yes, and the longer answer, let me give you a couple of examples of how that is manifesting itself. First is a partnership that was designed before I got to 1871 by Howard and the team, but we've since launched it with the YWCA Metropolitan Chicago, so Dory McWhorter, where every single member of 1871, whether you are a corporate tenant or you're a founder, has to go through safe and healthy workplace training to make sure that we are setting the conditions for how we want our organization to run and what we expect in our own space, but also to lay the groundwork for these young companies to understand what are the right people practices from day one. And so when they leave our space and grow and expand, they have that appropriate foundation, and so that they continue to be healthy organizations going forward. So that's one thing. The second thing is we believe that entrepreneurial talent and aspiration is everywhere, but opportunity and access is not. And we also believe we have a couple of core assets that nobody else has. And that is our curriculum, the people that teach that curriculum, and our mentor network. And so we're thinking about ways now of how do we structure those pieces and digitize them in such a way that we can, through our community partners, the ones that currently exist, as well as new ones like Boys and Girls Clubs, public library, maybe the prison system, how do we get our content out into the world, and so that people, no matter where you are across the city, has access to learning what the principles are to being an entrepreneur and building a business.
Okay, thank you. I think this is from Christy. I'm not sure if it's Christy Hefner or someone else.
Not Christy.
Okay, so well, all I can say is Christy. You didn't put down your full name. What is the future role of people in the new world order? This is a real question.
I actually think it is a real question, and I think it's not that hard to answer. So I think that there is and will remain a competitive advantage to being a human. Okay. And what I mean by that is that I want you to think about the robots and the machines and all of this. I want you to think about them as less of a competitor and more as a team member. And that it's going to take both the human side and the robot side to get to where we want to be. And when you think about the core interpersonal skills that are required for us to make sure we're teaching our kids as early as possible and are required for any job, no matter what it is, business or otherwise, it's things around how do you influence people, how do you communicate, how do you solve problems, how do you work in a team, how do you ask the right questions, those kinds of things. So I think there's going to be no shortage of opportunities for people to be able to continue to expand and grow their impact on the world, regardless of everything that I've shared up here.
Great. This is from Jose Torres with the Illinois Math and Science Academy. Jose, where are you? Back there. Would you speak to the responsibility of entrepreneurs and computer scientists to consider ethical implications of their efforts?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that that they do have an ethical obligation. I'm not sure everybody is necessarily aware of the implications of what they're creating when they're creating it. And then I mean, you can look at Facebook as an example. I don't think that there was any malintent when Facebook was growing and becoming this massive company, and they, for whatever reason, didn't have either the right people around the table or the guardrails in place to start to ask those tough questions, or people willing to listen to those tough questions to make sure that they would continue to steer in the right direction. And so I think there's some emerging lessons learned from some of the examples in the world right now that I'm hoping the entrepreneurs that are more at the front end of their, and computer sciences at the front end of their career kind of can incorporate, and as educators that we can make sure that we bring those to life. I know that there are several of the major tech entrepreneurs who are creating I don't know if it's like, I'm not sure it's a community group, but more of like a mastermind group of peers where they're really studying this stuff hard, on artificial intelligence in particular, to make sure that the robots don't, sort of get trained the wrong way, have biases, unintentionally built into their operating systems.
Great. This is from Bob Corey, who's with the Isulep Management LLC. Where is Chicago relative to other cities when it comes to fintech?
So I think Chicago has the opportunity to be the leader in fintech. We're not there yet, but I don't, with the companies that are surrounding us and in our neighborhood, in our backyard, there's no reason why Chicago can't be the leader on fintech and the leader on blockchain. And so, I think we're right in the pack, but I think there's room to grow. New York is, I would say, ahead of us at the moment.
Okay, got a couple more questions here. This is from Sharon Tickness with the Ford Group, I guess. What is the intersection of philanthropy and venture capital investments in this new technology?
We should ask some of our venture capitalists who are here. So the intersection of philanthropy and venture capitalists?
Venture capital investments.
So I'm not sure I totally understand the question. There are some venture capital firms that are very focused on social entrepreneurship. There are some philanthropic funds who are taking more of a venture capital mindset about where they invest for their own organizations. Better Chicago is a great example to get the best outcome, the best impact for their dollars invested. But I'm not sure I'm answering the question. Is the person here who wrote it?
Yes, you answered the question.
Oh, okay. All right, great. Thanks.
Oh, good.
But where do you see philanthropy in this new realm?
You mean where do I see it growing?
Making a difference.
Making a difference. Well, I think philanthropy plays a huge role in supporting all the education required to make sure that people are equipped to do these jobs, and that we're training our kids, particularly in K through 12, starting as early as possible. So I think philanthropic dollars can go there. I think they can support the nonprofits around the community who are trying to bring the community together and enable entrepreneurs to be successful. There are several of, we're one of them, but there are several of us there. So I think that I'm hopeful that philanthropic dollars from corporates will continue to come in to help us deliver all across the city and to any entrepreneur that has any kind of background possible.
Okay, thank you. We've got a couple more questions. Betsy, this is from Don Hammerly, who's with the Dominican University School of Information Studies. As a university professor, how can I best connect my students with 1871 for internships, professional field experiences, research opportunities?
All right, so Diana, please stand up. I'm not going to make you talk.
Come on, Diana, stand up. You're with friends.
So Diana is on my team. Diana Lopez-Obaldo. She and Jeannie Reedy. You want to stand up too? It's okay. It's okay. These two are the dot connectors on all those kinds of initiatives. Where are you that asked that question? Okay, great. So you should come talk to us afterwards. We would love to have you come to 1871. We bring student groups in all the time. We have an internship fair that actually Courtney on my team helps facilitate that we can link your kids into. So there's no shortage of opportunities to do something.
Okay, I have two more questions here. This is from Irma Cornier, who's with Kids First Chicago. And she wants to know if 1871 is currently working with CPS schools. We could expand that to beyond CPS. Are you willing to create a partnership or program for girls and young women to learn, she says tech coding, but you are a role model for women. And just, I think this week in the paper, there was mention of the head of Pepsi, a woman also who's leaving for whatever reasons. Could you sort of fold that into answering this question?
Fold Andrew Newey's departure into?
Right. And, women, glass ceilings, the whole ball of wax.
Okay, so I'm going to separate them into two things. The first one, do we have a partnership with CPS? Howard taught a class at Diet High School. And we've done some other program, I'm looking at my team, other programming with CPS individual schools. Leap Education, which is run by Phyllis Lockett, operates out of our space. They're an amazing nonprofit institution thinking about K through 12 education. They just got a massive grant from Chan Zuckerberg Initiative to extend their impact. And so we've got we would love to be as connected as possible to the CPS kids. The fact that Indra Nui has retired after, I think 12 or 13, stepping it down
Something
after
like
12 or
that.
13 years, you know, I think that she's at, I don't think there's anything that happened. I think she's at a certain point in her life cycle. I think it did leave, though. There's only 25 women who are CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. And so there continues to be a pipeline challenge there and an opportunity for more women to be in the C-suite and therefore have those opportunities to become the CEO over time. There's a lot of people that are trying to think about, you know, this problem and working on this problem. And I think the more we can train our kids and give them opportunities early on, gives them the best success, you know, best sort of start for their career path that they can then grow on.
Okay, Betsy, this is from Dara Crowfoot at DePaul. What's the biggest challenge ahead for 1871?
Let's see. You know, I think we are actually in really good shape. I think the big question for us is how do we continue to extend our impact beyond our walls? And I've mentioned it already in sort of this idea of connecting our core capabilities and assets with other parts of the city. But I think from a challenge perspective, or I'll reframe it to an opportunity perspective, I think it's that. I think it's how can we best partner with all the organizations around the city to deliver our content to those that can grow up or already grown up to launch their own businesses, because that's what we're here for. That's what we do.
Okay, final question. As moderator, I get to pick it.
I was going to say, I thought that was sneaking one in.
This was in Cranes just a couple weeks ago.
Okay.
It says that you've hiked with reindeer
Yes.
in the Arctic Circle. What was that all about?
Yeah, I get that question a surprisingly large amount even before that Cranes thing came out. So when I was, so I've always had this view of vacation time of doing something that seems a little bit out of the ordinary, and because I like to tell stories, so I like to do things that seem sort of random to other people and then come back so I can tell the stories. And I also, when I was 37, I was feeling like I was living in this little box. The economic crisis was on. I was serving life insurance companies. It was a difficult time. I only could talk about Ohio State and life insurance. And and so I felt like I was becoming uninteresting and didn't feel like myself. And so I like to say I took out a piece of paper, but it wasn't. It was my Excel spreadsheet. And I wrote down the 40 things I wanted to do by the time I was 40. And so everything that was on that list that the Cranes talked about was in that list. And so then I just started executing on that list, and it sort of created a completely different mindset for me about how I think about owning my life and the choices that I made. And one of those choices was to hike in Sweden for a week with reindeer carrying our pack. It was completely transformational. If you like to hike, I would recommend it. The only odd part is that we ate reindeer for dinner. Not the same reindeer, though. And I loved my reindeer. I mean, I still, you know, I have a picture with me and my reindeer. It was fantastic.
So much for Rudolph.
Yeah.
Anyhow, in case you're wondering, a couple of other things that Crane said about Betsy and who knew. She's taken several trips around the world, and she's been a seat filler at the Primetime Emmy Awards.
Back to that list, I'm telling you.
Add it to the list.
Yeah.
Let's give her a big round of applause, folks. This is tremendous. Thank you, Tom. And don't go away yet.
Okay.